Hey everybody, welcome to All There Is. Thanks for tuning in today. Today I want to give an epilogue or an update on a story that I told several years ago. About 5 years ago in 2018, I think it was May 2018 actually, I published a book, a memoir called Chasing the Merry-Go-Round, Holding On to Hope and Home When the World Moves Too Fast. And it was a story about my brother. It was a true story of what it's like to live in a world where you can't keep up because life just moves too fast. And the reality is that life moves too fast for some people. And so this was the story of my brother, Bobby. He was 10 months old when he came to live with my family, and he was adopted into our family after a lengthy custody battle. But instead of that settling him, it set off a lifelong struggle for him to find a place to belong, a place to call home. And like an old-fashioned merry-go-round, the world moved at a speed that was just too fast for Bobby. He couldn't keep up, which prevented him from keeping a job, a roof over his head, and the basics needed to survive. The life he dreamt of was always out of reach. And at the time, we didn't know why, which set me off on a lifelong struggle to figure out why. And what I found out that while our culture ideals a quote-unquote normal life and what that looks like, it can distort our perspective. And the story that I ended up telling, Chasing the Merry-Go-Round, allows readers to see the world through the eyes of a person with intellectual and physical disabilities, which can often be invisible, especially at first glance. It's a story about struggle and hope, survival and resilience, and most of all, the gift of acceptance and love. So the story was published 5 years ago. The story timeline actually takes place from about 2007 to 2012, mostly. I mean, I tell my brother's whole story up to about 2012. So it's been a while, and a lot has happened. It's been 10 years since this book ended. And some things have happened recently that I thought readers would be really interested to know. People ask me all the time, how is Bobby? How's he doing? Is he okay? And the good news is, and the short answer is, the headline is, yes, Bobby's doing great. We've really settled in. You know, we spent a lot of years struggling to get Bobby diagnosed, to get him the medical treatment, to get him the help and the support that he needed, the resources. And once we did that, it allowed him to settle in to a life. And that's what he's done the last 10 years. And so things have been really stable. He still struggles, obviously, with his narcolepsy. And of course, you know, some of his other disabilities haven't changed, but we've all settled into a life that, for the most part, he finds fulfilling. Now, I say all that, he's settled into a good life, but it just seems like it's always something that he's up against. And it's just constant struggle for him. And he's a survivor, so he finds a way to beat it. And 2 years ago, in May, he was hit by a car as a pedestrian. He was crossing the street and he was, following the rules. The light changed. He was in the crosswalk. He was crossing the street, and a car that was turning left came out into the intersection, didn't see him, I'm assuming, and didn't even brake and just hit him, catapulted his body into the air and onto the side of the road. Of course, that car accident, him getting struck by a car, had major impacts to his body. And he's been dealing with those the last 2 years. He's had to have several surgeries and therapies, and, he's okay. He broke his pelvis and has had some long-term damage to his neck and shoulder and hips. But he's okay. Like I said, Bobby, I'm telling you that kid has 9 lives, and he's doing okay in spite of that, in true Bobby form too. When he got hit by the car, he called me, he called my sisters and my mother and had a similar conversation with all of us and said, "Oh, I got hit by a car today." And I said, "What do you mean you got hit by a car today?" And he said, "Oh, I was crossing the street and a car hit me." And I said, "Oh my God, are you okay?" And he said, "Yeah, the ambulance came, but I didn't go in it. I refused treatment." I said, "Are you sure you're okay?" Now, when he told me the story, I got the picture that a car was moving very slowly and maybe just nudged him and he fell over, right? That was the image that I got. Well, a couple of days later, I was with Bobby, And he happened to get a text message from someone, and it was the video of him getting hit by a car. I didn't know this, but apparently these days a lot of cars have dash cams. And there was a car at the intersection, random stranger, we don't know, didn't know Bobby, but her dash cam caught the whole thing on camera. So she pulled up, thank goodness, she pulled over, got Bobby's phone number, and a few days later she sent Bobby the video. So I'm with him in my car, and he shows me the video. And I'm like, holy shit, Bobby, you got hit. You got nailed. You got hit really hard. And he's like, yeah, I guess I did. So to make a long story short, after that, I said, you really need to go get checked out. Like, this is no joke. You were seriously hit by a car. You are lucky to be alive. And I took him to urgent care that day, and they did x-rays, and that's when we found out he had a broken pelvis, and that kind of started us off on this journey. But it's been a crazy 2 years, even though it's a little more settled than what you read about in Chasing the Merry-Go-Round. What I want to talk about today, the real headline, the real epilogue, is that last week, through circumstances that I don't want to get too much into detail for privacy reasons, but through circumstances that none of us saw coming, Bobby was able to purchase his own home. He now owns his own home. We signed the papers on Thursday. For those of you who've read Bobby's story and know his story, you know that this has been a lifelong dream of his. And to be honest, we never thought it would happen. In fact, in Chasing the Merry-Go-Round, one of the key themes that we talk about is the idea of home. I mean, the subtitle is Holding On to Hope and Home When the World Moves Too Fast. And the theme of that whole memoir is the idea of home. And for Bobby, home was always a tangible thing. Something that he wanted. He wanted his own house with 4 walls. He wanted his own garage and yard and driveway to shovel. And what I learned through Bobby is that home for me was the people that I love and knowing that they're okay. And for me, it wasn't physical. It was about the people. And it's a major theme throughout that story. And the quote that I start the memoir with is this, which is something it's become a credo for me, really, that I base a lot of what I do on, including this podcast. And it's this: home is a place all of us want to be. We all want to have our corner of the world, surrounded by people who know us, accept us, love us. A place where we are safe, warm, fed. A place where we have enough, where we are enough. This is all there is. This is where the name of this podcast comes from, All There Is. And that was a lesson, one of the many lessons that Bobby taught me. So in the story, there were several chapters about the idea of home and Bobby's dream of owning his own home. And again, one of the other major themes is this, the merry-go-round, the circles, the chasing Bobby from place to place to place. And when you read it, if you haven't yet, you'll see that he was always moving. I mean, that was just a major theme for us back then. And I'm happy to say that all that moving around did slow down and stop. And a few years ago, one of my sisters, her and her husband actually bought a home. They bought a small house and rented it to Bobby. And that really gave him what we thought would be as close as he would ever get to owning his own home, to actually rent from family who allowed him to treat it just like his own home. And that was great. And we thought that was going to be it. We still really never thought Bobby would ever be able to buy his own home. But he got the next closest thing when my sister and her husband generously bought this little 2-bedroom house with a garage and a yard for him. And he's been super happy. And so, the latest turn of events where he was actually able to purchase that home and own it for himself, none of us saw coming, and it's been amazing. And I'm going to read this chapter from Chasing the Merry-Go-Round. This chapter that I'm going to read for you now is called Group Home. I pulled into Bobby's driveway, stopping just a few feet from his overhead garage door. I was there to take him to a doctor's appointment. I could see him, his big round head in the window looking right at me. I waited for him to come out, but he didn't move. I was already running a little late and wondered if we would make it in time for his appointment with the neurologist. Still, He didn't move. Rather than beep the horn, I got out to see why he wasn't coming. When my car door slammed shut, his body suddenly bounced to life and he jerked his head. I realized he had fallen asleep standing up, waiting for me. I still took him to most of his doctor's appointments, but once things were a little more settled with doctors that took his government insurance, actually asked him questions, listened to his answers, and really examined him, sometimes my parents took him. But I only let them do the easy ones. Podiatrist, general practitioner, eye doctor. I wouldn't give up the neurologist. Not long after that day, I was out of town when my mother took him to his appointment with a nutritionist, an expert in diabetic nutrition, to talk about his rising blood sugar. I had coached her on the phone before the appointment. I told her to make sure the nutritionist didn't yell at him for not losing weight, and to explain to her that obesity is a side effect of both narcolepsy and fetal alcohol syndrome, that some of his 9 medicines could elevate his blood glucose, that he didn't understand how to read nutrition labels and struggled with recipes. I reminded her that he gets nervous with doctors and anyone he perceives in a position of authority. I told her to not let them put him on insulin until we understood how it would affect his narcolepsy, until they talked to his neurologist. I reminded her of the baby she rescued all those years ago and that she wasn't done. She still needed to fight for him. My mother listened to me go on and promised to call me after the appointment. "It didn't go well," were her first words when I answered the phone. Shit. I knew I should have taken him to the appointment. Bobby's fasting blood sugar was 544, my mother continued. Diabetes would be the latest in a long line of self-destructive attacks his body would wage against itself. He's at risk of diabetic coma, aneurysm, stroke, heart attack. Could happen at any time. He has to get his sugar down. He could die at any time. Kelly, are you there? Yes, I'm here. Keep going. I was taking notes as she was talking. I always took notes. I knew I would need them at some point. As I tried to keep up with her and write down the key words, my brain kept getting stuck on, he could die at any time. The doctor wants to prescribe insulin, 1 shot per day. I had been against putting him on insulin. He was already taking so many medications. Pills strong enough to keep him awake during the day, pills that control his cataplexy and electrical shocks that run through his body, the pill that is supposed to keep the hallucinations at bay, the pill he has to take to counteract the one that keeps him awake all day so he can sleep through the night, pills for his high cholesterol, triglycerides, and heartburn. How could one more drug be good for him? The doctor really thinks it will be okay. Our bodies make insulin already. It should make him feel better. I made a note to call his neurologist later to verify that insulin wouldn't make his narcolepsy worse. She is concerned that Bobby won't be able to manage this himself. He doesn't remember to take his medicine now. He can't forget his insulin. He also needs to change his diet and lose weight, which he doesn't seem to be able to do on his own. I don't argue with her. He didn't always remember. He needed to be reminded to take his medicines, to eat the right things, and he didn't always make the right decision. The diagnosis of his developmental disabilities as a result of fetal alcohol syndrome a few years ago helped us understand and accept why. Still, I was defensive when other people accused him of it. Kelly, she also mentioned a group home. Bobby broke down in the doctor's office as soon as she said it. This is also when I broke down. Group home. I had trouble focusing on anything else my mother said after that. My throat closed off my words. I tried holding back my tears so I could finish the phone call, but I couldn't stop them. My tears fell, spotting my notepad. Mom, we're not putting him in a group home. He's 37 years old. Kelly, it may be the only option. Well, it's going to be the last option. I'll stop every day on my way to work to give him his insulin shot. Before we hung up, we talked for a few more minutes about the details of when his prescription would be ready and whether or not my sister Patty, an RN, could help set up home care. I stopped trying to hold back my tears and cried. My chest heaved with sobs I could no longer contain. Strange noises came from my throat. I was alone, and I didn't care what I looked like or sounded like. I let the cries come. I let the tears fall and my nose run. My mind drifted to Bobby, how upset he must have been. I wish I had been there at the doctor's office with him instead of my parents. I called Bobby and we talked about what the doctor said. I told him we would do whatever we could. I told him he had to try harder, do better. He had to help me fight this. He promised. to try harder, to do better. We'll figure it out, Bob. We always do. After we hung up, I lay down on the couch and closed my eyes. I tried to come up with a plan for this latest challenge, tried to think of the next thing I could do, the phone calls I needed to make. Since Bobby came into my life 36 years ago, I had been trying to keep him alive and to help him find a place he can call home. I had chased him all over Binghamton when he ran away at 16. When he came back, I still followed him. To East Canal Street, West Canal Street, our parents' home, Five Corners, William Street, Madison Street, Lenox Avenue, behind some bar on some street neither of us can remember, Canal Street again, Walnut Street, Florida Road, North Main Street, a friend's extra bedroom in Central Square, a friend's couch in North Syracuse, the John Milton Inn. Starting over again after the fire, searching and finding him over and over again, the jobs he had lost, the testing, the doctors, the forms, all with one goal, to give him the life he deserves, the life he dreams of, his own corner of the world with a family and a home of his own, a home of his own. I haven't read that in a while, and reading it now, it's kind of mind-blowing, and it's emotional, and it's almost surreal, and to where we are today. Since, we wrote that, he has been on insulin and diabetic treatment for his high blood sugar. Instead of a group home, what we did is we doubled down on finding him resources, and my sister, who works for a home healthcare company, did get home health care set up for him. So he has a nurse who comes every 2 weeks, who pours his medicine and checks him out and makes sure that he's doing what he needs to be doing. And that has really settled things. And he stopped moving around quite so much. He moved around 1 or 2 more times after this story. And now we never thought, Bobby never thought, I never thought, the rest of my family never thought it would be in the cards for him to own his own home. And now here he is, 2023. He's got his own place. It's paid for, and he's going to have it for the rest of his life. I told him the other day when we were signing papers, and we were both quiet, and we sat across the table from each other just like we used to back in 2007, 2008, when we were going through all that testing and diagnosis and meeting with doctors and psychologists and trying to get him answers and help. And we always found ourselves sitting across from each other. And last week, as we sat in the attorney's office signing papers, and we were both quiet, and I just looked at him and said, "Bob, how's this feel?" And all he could do was smile, just said, "It feels good." And I said to him, "This means, Bob, you're not going to move again. This is it. You're staying here until you die. You may only be 45 years old, but you are staying here the next 40 or 50 years. And I said, "Do you realize that? Do you remember all the moving? Do you remember all the moving from place to place, apartment to apartment, and just chasing that all the time? And you never have to move again. This is it. You are in your home." And it was just such an amazing feeling that neither one of us could really put words to it. And that's really cool. It's really kind of mind-blowing. And I think, our whole family is just super excited and happy for him. And, for us, we're a family of faith, and we believe that this is answered prayer. It's answers to prayers that are so old, we forgot we even prayed them. It was like, wow. At least for me, I had this thought, like, wow, God, I hadn't prayed this prayer in a long time. Years ago, I did. You knew the cries of my heart. You knew the cries of Bobby's heart. And here we are all these years later, living in answered prayer from so long ago, living in a miracle that we had given up on. That's why I love this story. It was just a good reminder to me that don't ever give up on your dreams. Don't ever give up on your prayers. Don't give up on the cries of your heart. Don't give up on God. He remembers. He still holds all those things dear to him. And you just never know what is around the corner, so don't give up. It could be right around the corner. I hope you enjoyed this update today. I know I enjoyed giving it. And if you haven't read Chasing the Merry-Go-Round yet, you can get a copy on Amazon. It's in Kindle form, it's in Audible form, and it's in paperback. So go check it out. And, for me, it's totally not about book sales. It's about telling the story again of what it's like to live in a world where you can't keep up. And for me, all the lessons that this person that came into our family taught me about the world, about people, and about home. You can go to kellybargabus.com to find out more information, to listen to past episodes. And until we meet again, take care.